I'll be honest with you. This story, it ain't pretty. And maybe that's why you should listen. Because everyone thinks they know their mind, until the mind grabs them by the throat in the middle of a trade and squeezes. And that's what happened to me. Yeah, me. A guy who's been in this game almost 40 years. A guy who watched grown men cry over a 20-pip candle. A guy who lost more sleep than money. And trust me, I lost a lot of both. But here's the real hook, and it might sting you a bit. Why do some traders turn deadly consistent, while others sink every damn year? Why does one person hold a winner for months, and another cuts it after 5 minutes? Why does fear feel louder than logic, even when the setup is perfect? And why did I, a stubborn fool back then, keep losing for years, even though the charts were screaming the truth right in my face? If any of that sounds like you, good, sit tight, because by the time you finish this episode, you're going to understand the psychology that turned me from a shaky, emotional, losing trader into something else entirely. A consistent killer, not a guru, not a motivator, just a businessman who learned the hard way, who bled for every lesson, and who's about to hand them to you without the bleeding part. But the questions, those stay with you. You ever watch your own hands shake? Not because of fear, but because something inside you suddenly realizes, oh, I'm not built the way I thought I was. That moment hit me one morning. Charts were calm, coffee was warm, and yet my heart was doing laps like it owed somebody money. And that's when the real question crawled into my head. Why do we act brave until the market asks us to prove it? People don't talk about that. They pretend confidence is a button. Click. Done. But nah, confidence is a storm. And that storm starts the second you put real money on the line. And that's where most traders break. Quietly, privately. In a room where nobody sees the panic except themselves. So let me drag you into that room with me. Because that room was the beginning of my shift. And I want you to think about these questions hard, like I did. Like every losing trader eventually does. Why do you swear you'll follow your plan, but the moment price moves against you, your mind becomes a wild animal? Why can you predict a clean move perfectly, yet you still enter late, exit early, and doubt the one thing you studied? Why do tiny losses feel like personal insults, while big losses feel like accidents you didn't see coming? Why does the market feel logical at night, but completely unpredictable in the morning? And the most brutal one of all, why do you think experience will save you when experience only works if you're willing to face the truth about yourself? These weren't small questions. They tore through me. They forced me to see a version of myself I hated, a man who was trading money, but was actually fighting his own reflection. You see, the market wasn't my enemy, never was. My enemy was the part of me that wanted shortcuts, wanted safety, wanted certainty in a world that never promised it. And here's the truth most traders never swallow. Every streak, every dumb emotional decision wasn't caused by the chart. It was caused by the invisible war happening before I ever clicked buy. Once I understood that, things shifted. Not instantly, not magically, but slowly, quietly. Like a man finally learning how to breathe underwater, because the market wasn't testing my strategy. It was testing my identity, testing if I could stay still, testing if I could act when scared, testing if I could stop lying to myself. Consistency didn't show up when I found better setups. It showed up when I stopped running from those questions, those brutal, uncomfortable questions that you probably feel right now in your stomach. And trust me, if those questions make you uncomfortable, you're exactly where you need to be. You ever catch yourself staring at the chart, but you're not really looking at the chart? You're looking at something behind it, something hiding, something that feels like it's watching you back. That happened to me once. Late night, room was quiet, chart glowing like a tiny sun in the dark. And suddenly I felt it, this strange, almost embarrassing truth. I wasn't fighting the market. I was fighting the ghost of every stupid mistake I ever made. That ghost had my face, my doubts, my fear of being wrong, my obsession with being right, my need for the trade to validate me. And that's when a new set of questions punched me harder than any losing streak ever did. Let these questions sit. They're not pretty, but they're the ones that crack you open. Why do you get angry at the chart when the chart doesn't even know you exist? Why do you feel personally attacked by a loss as if the market planned it just for you? Why do you keep hoping for the perfect setup when deep inside you know you wouldn't handle it properly if it landed in your lap? Why do you remember every loss you ever took but forget the rules you promised yourself you'd never break? And here's the one that haunted me for years. Why do you talk about discipline while secretly believing you're the exception to the discipline? I had to face it. I wasn't trading price. I was trading memories, old emotions, buried frustrations, the leftovers of decisions I never forgave myself for. This is something nobody tells new traders. Your past self sits beside you every time you click buy. He whispers, he panics, he drags you back to every failure you tried to forget. And unless you deal with him, he becomes the one trading your account, not you. Here's something I learned during a losing month that felt like a natural disaster. Markets don't repeat, but people do. I kept blowing accounts for the same reason. Not because the chart was unpredictable, not because spreads widened, not because news spiked, but because my shadow traded faster than I did. That old version of me, the impulsive one, the afraid one, the I'll just hold a bit longer one, he always acted first, before logic, before skill, before any of the lessons I claimed to know. And until I separated myself from that shadow, I couldn't win. Not consistently, not sanely. So I did something strange, maybe even stupid at the time, but it saved me. I started asking myself one question before every trade. Is this decision mine, or is it my shadow talking? You cannot imagine how many bad trades die right there, how many emotional errors suffocate before they're born, how many times I stopped myself from jumping into madness just because I caught the whisper early. Eventually, I learned something powerful. The real psychological battle isn't controlling the market. It's controlling the invisible version of you that still wants to trade like a child. Once you cage that version, the fear, the ego, the desperation, the revenge, all of it, trading becomes quieter, cleaner, almost boring. But boring is where consistency lives. Boring is where killers are made. Boring is where I finally turned the corner. And believe me, the moment you stop trading your shadow, you start trading the truth. The day I realized my biggest enemy was success itself. Ever notice how a good trade can ruin you faster than a bad one? Sounds insane, right? But that's exactly what happened to me. A single winning streak, small, nothing magical, almost destroyed everything I'd built. Yeah, not the losses, the wins. That's the part nobody warns you about, because a win does something dangerous. It whispers. It tells you you're special. It tells you the rules don't apply to you anymore. It tricks you into thinking you've figured it out. And one day, I believed that whisper, and that belief cost me more than any losing trade ever had. Let's dig into the real traps, the ones hiding behind your victories. Why does a winning streak make your hand heavier on the next position? You ever notice that? The moment you start winning, your lot size magically grows like it ate too much fertilizer. Why do you stop respecting your strategy after a few good trades? Like suddenly, the plan that saved you last week is too slow now, too boring, too safe. Why do you feel smarter than the market? The second the market lets you win, that one right there destroys more traders than fear ever did. Why do you get addicted to being right, but terrified of proving yourself wrong? Why do you hold your winners too long, thinking this one will change your life, when all it's doing is changing your judgment? This is the brutal psychology nobody talks about. Winning creates illusions, and illusions create disasters. I learned that the hard way. When I was young, every win felt like a trophy, a prize, a pat on the back from the market. But the market doesn't clap for you. It doesn't care about you. It only reflects your level of control, or your lack of it. And back then, I had none. Here's the thing about winning streaks. They expose who you really are, not the disciplined version you pretend to be. Not the calm voice you use in front of friends. Your real self, the one that's hungry, greedy, overconfident, ready to gamble because, hey, I'm up anyway. A dangerous version. A version that destroys accounts faster than fear ever will. I remember one month, I had 5 perfect trades back to back. Clean entries, clean exits. Everything felt smooth, too smooth. And you know what I did next? I convinced myself I could scale up just a little, just one trade, just one experiment. You already know how that ended. The market slapped me so hard, I felt it in my teeth. Not because the trade was wrong, but because my confidence was louder than my discipline. And that's when it hit me. Wins don't make you stronger. Wins expose your weak spots. Losses test your emotions, but wins test your identity. Most traders don't fail because they can't handle losing. They fail because they can't handle winning. Sounds backwards, but it's true. A loss humbles you. A win lies to you. The day I accepted that, the day I treated every win like a loan instead of a gift, my trading changed. My whole approach changed. My mindset solidified into something colder, sharper, more dangerous in the right way. I stopped chasing feeling good and started chasing control. Because control is what turns a trader from emotional into consistent. And consistency is the only thing this market ever respects. You ever hear a silence so loud it scares you? Not a noise, not a loss, not a spike on the chart, just silence. That empty, stale moment right before you take a trade, when nothing is happening, but everything inside you is screaming for action. That silence almost ruined me, because silence exposes the truth. And back then, I wasn't ready for the truth. See, people think trading is about the candles, the strategy, the setup. But the real battlefield? It's the quiet moment where your finger hovers over the mouse and you feel something inside you begging, come on, just click it, do something. That urge destroyed more accounts than volatility ever did, and I had to learn that the hard way. Think about this. Really think about it. Why is it so damn hard to wait, even when you know waiting is the smartest move? Why do your emotions get louder when the market gets quieter? It's like your brain wants chaos more than clarity. Why does your hand twitch for a trade, even when you promised yourself you'd take only high-quality ones? Why do you feel guilty doing nothing, as if patience is some kind of crime? Why do you convince yourself that one small trade won't hurt, knowing damn well that one small trade has destroyed you before? These are not small questions. They're the psychological cracks that leak poison slowly, silently, until one day, your entire account is gone, and you don't even know which moment ruined you. It's not the big decision that kills traders. It's the micro moments, the tiny urges, the little lies you whisper to yourself. And those whispers always show up in the silence. Let me give you something I learned from nearly 4 decades in this game. Discipline isn't tested when you trade. It's tested when you want to trade, but shouldn't. Anybody can click a button. Anybody can follow a plan when the setup appears like a glowing neon sign. But waiting is where the real killers are made. There was a period in my life where I forced at least one trade a day, not because the market gave me a reason, but because my ego demanded activity. I thought doing nothing meant I was falling behind. I thought patience was weakness. Turns out, patience is the highest form of strength a trader can ever develop. One day, I sat in front of my screen for 7 hours, not a single setup, not a single signal, just charts moving like they were half asleep. My old self, he would have fired a trade just to feel alive, just to feel something, just to tell himself he was working. But that day, I did nothing. and it was torture. But that torture was the lesson, because here's the truth that flipped my whole career. A trader becomes consistent the day he stops trying to fill silence with stupidity. The silence is not your enemy. The silence is the filter, the test, the gatekeeper separating gamblers from professionals. When I finally accepted it, when I treated the silence with respect instead of panic, my trading transformed. My patience thickened like armor. My emotions softened. My impulsiveness slowed. I stopped fighting the quiet and started using it. And that's when I realized something profound. The market rewards the trader who waits, not the one who wants. You want consistency. You want control. You want to stop blowing accounts, master the silence. Because that silence is where every great trader is born. Let me ask you something strange. Have you ever loved the idea of trading more than the actual trading itself? Be honest, because that love, that shiny, exciting, addictive part of trading, almost destroyed me. And it wasn't the charts, it wasn't the losses, it wasn't the market. It was the feeling, the rush, the thrill of possibility, the little spark in your chest when price starts moving in your favor. The fantasy of catching the big one, the story you'll tell later, the identity you build in your head. I'm a trader. That feeling is beautiful and deadly. Because the moment you fall in love with the wrong part of trading, the part that isn't real, the market will break your heart without blinking. The things traders love that destroy them. Let's tear into the real problems, the ones most traders avoid admitting. Why do we crave excitement in a profession where excitement kills performance? Why do we fall in love with being right, but refuse to love being disciplined? Why does the fantasy of a huge win feel more important than the reality of consistent small wins? Why do we romanticize the perfect trade, but ignore the boring setups that actually keep us alive? Why do traders chase adrenaline like the market owes them entertainment? This is what nobody understands. Most traders don't fail because they lack skill. They fail because they love the wrong things. They love the game, but not the rules. They love the rush, but not the patience. They love the identity, but not the responsibility. And those loves, they drown you. Slowly, softly, until one day you look at your account and say, damn, how did it get this bad? It got that bad because the part of trading you fell in love with is the part designed to destroy you. The moment I fell out of love with trading, there was a day, maybe the hardest day of my career, when I realized I didn't love trading, not the real trading. I loved the illusion of it, the story, the thrill, the chase, but the real business, the cold, mechanical, boring repetition, the long waiting, the quiet decisions, the slow building of discipline, that wasn't love. That was work, hard work, grown man work, businessman work. And when I finally accepted that, everything changed. I stopped seeking excitement and started seeking clarity. I stopped hunting home runs and started respecting singles. I stopped treating the market like a lottery and started treating it like a business machine. And the truth hit me like a brick. Trading is not supposed to feel good. It's supposed to feel controlled. That's when my consistency clicked. Not when I became smarter, but when I fell out of love with the fantasy and fell in line with the reality. From that day forward, I stopped chasing the feeling of being a trader and started becoming the worker behind the trades. That shift, that emotional separation, is what made me consistent. Not a strategy, not an indicator, not some magical pattern, just this simple truth. If you fall in love with the excitement of trading, you'll lose. If you fall in love with the discipline of trading, you'll win. And for the first time in my life, I understood why the market breaks so many people. It's not punishing them, it's correcting their focus. The brutal truth the market forced me to admit. You ever have a moment where the chart looks perfectly normal, but something inside you feels exposed? Like the market isn't showing candlesticks anymore. It's showing a a mirror you never asked to look into. That moment hit me one afternoon so sharply, I actually pushed my chair back. Not because of fear, not because of a loss, but because I suddenly realized the market knew more about me than I knew about myself. It wasn't testing my strategy. It wasn't testing my entries. It wasn't testing my knowledge. It was testing my truth. The truth I spent years avoiding, the truth I refused to see. And that was the moment everything in my trading life started to shake. The truths traders run from. Let me ask you the questions that hit me like a hammer. The questions every losing trader avoids. The questions that separate amateurs from killers. Why do you take responsibility for your winners, but blame the market for your losers? Why do you promise yourself discipline, but secretly believe you can break the rules just this once? Why do you pretend you're patient, yet rush into trades the second boredom hits? Why do you call yourself a trader, but act more like a gambler trying to get lucky? Why do you study strategies non-stop, but avoid studying your own behavior? These questions are brutal, ugly, uncomfortable, but they're real, and the market sees the answers long before you do. That's the scary part. You can lie to yourself. You can lie to your friends. You can lie to your trading journal, but you can't lie to your results. They expose the truth every single time, and the truth I had to face, I wasn't losing because I lacked skill. I was losing because I lacked honesty. The shift that happened when I finally stopped lying. There's a reason most traders never grow. It's not because the market is hard. It's because the market forces honesty, and honesty hurts. When I finally sat down, truly sat down, and faced the real reasons I kept losing, I felt sick, physically sick, because I realized I was the problem, not the spreads, not the volatility, not the news, not the broker, me. And admitting that was the turning point. See, once you stop pretending, once you stop making excuses, your whole trading world shifts. I stopped calling bad trades unlucky. I started calling them what they were, emotional decisions. I stopped calling early exits smart. I started calling them what they were, fear. I stopped telling myself I know what I'm doing. Instead, I asked, why did I just do that? That question, that tiny, powerful question, it changed my career. Because this is the truth most traders will never face. The market isn't destroying them. Their unspoken truths are, the day I accepted full responsibility, every loss, every panic click, every greedy move was the day I finally gained control. Not control over the market. Nobody gets that. Control over myself. And that's the only control that matters. Once I became honest, my trading became clearer. My decisions slowed. My behavior matured. My account stabilized. Because consistency isn't built on knowledge. Consistency is built on truth. The kind of truth that cuts deep, but heals deeper. The hardest lesson, doing more, was making me worse. You ever work so hard that you actually start getting worse? Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened to me. There was a period in my trading life where I thought effort automatically meant progress. More charts, more setups, more trades, more studying, more screen time. And yet, the more I did, the more damage I caused. One day I looked at my results and felt this strange, heavy punch in my chest. All my effort was actually pushing me further away from consistency. And that realization hit me like a cold slap. Not because I was lazy, but because I finally understood that trading is the only profession where doing less often makes you better. The trap of doing too much. Let me ask you the same questions that tore apart my delusions. The same questions I wish someone had asked me years earlier. Why do you feel guilty when you're not trading, as if sitting still means you're failing? Why do you believe the market will reward you just because you put in more hours? Why do you chase setups just because you don't want your day to be wasted? Why do you overload yourself with analysis until the chart stops looking like price and starts looking like noise? Why do you think taking more trades will magically create more profit when deep down you know it creates more mistakes. Here's the painful truth most traders never accept. Over effort is just disguised desperation. You convince yourself you're working hard, but what you're really doing is trying to force the market to give you something it never promised. And that mindset, it drains you, it blinds you, it leads you straight into decisions you later pretend just happened. But they didn't just happen, you pushed yourself into them. Because in your mind, doing nothing felt wrong, so doing something, even something stupid, felt right. That's how traders lose. There came a point after burning through too many trades, too many hours, too much emotional energy, where I had to confront an ugly realization. My need to trade was stronger than my need to trade well. And that's when everything shifted. Not because I got better, but because I stopped trying to drown the market with effort. Trading isn't construction. You don't build consistency by adding more bricks. You build it by removing the ones that don't belong. I learned to do less. I learned to watch more. I learned to wait until the trade came all the way to me. Not halfway. Not almost. Not it looks kinda good. I stopped forcing outcomes and started protecting my energy. Started protecting my clarity. Started protecting my ability to think. Because here's the truth. Most traders ignore until it's too late. The market doesn't reward effort. The market rewards precision. One clean decision is worth more than 20 messy ones. One well-timed trade is worth more than an entire week of overtrading. One moment of restraint can save you from hours of regret. Consistency came when I realized that my biggest edge wasn't knowledge, wasn't indicators, wasn't experience, wasn't even intuition. It was restraint. Pure, simple, boring, deadly effective restraint. The kind of restraint that turns a trader from emotional to professional, from reactive to selective, from chaotic to consistent. And once that clicked, everything in my trading tightened. My entries, my exits, my patience, my expectations, my whole identity. Because the market isn't asking you to do more. It's asking you to stop doing too much. You ever get the strange feeling that the market is observing you? Not in a mystical way, not in some conspiracy way, but in a painfully real, it knows exactly how weak you are kind of way. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, charts barely moving, room dark except for the glow of the screen, and suddenly I felt this strange heaviness, like the market wasn't reacting to my decisions. It was waiting for them. Waiting to see if I'd break, if I'd get impatient, if I'd act out of ego, if I'd do something stupid just because nobody was watching me but me. And that's when it hit me with a jolt that shook my spine. Trading shows you exactly who you are when no one is around to judge you. And most traders can't handle the version of themselves they find in that solitude, the behavior you can't hide from yourself. Let me ask you the same questions the market silently asked me. Questions that expose weaknesses no indicator ever could. Why do you follow your rules only when someone is watching, but break them the moment you're alone? Why do you risk more when nobody will see the mistake? Why do you let emotions run wild when there is no one there to hold you accountable? Why do you become reckless the moment the pressure disappears, as if the absence of judgment gives you permission to self-destruct? Why do you justify bad trades with beautiful excuses, but punish yourself brutally for the good ones you didn't take? These aren't chart problems. These aren't strategy problems. These aren't maybe I need a new setup problems. These are identity problems. The parts of you that surface when the room is quiet and the mouse is in your hand and the decision is yours alone. Most traders never make it, not because they can't read price, but because they can't read themselves. And the market sees that long before they do. The day I fixed the version of me that trades alone. There was a moment, a very private moment, when I realized I was two different traders. The trader I pretended to be, and the trader I actually was, when the door closed and the screen lit up and nobody else existed. The real me was impulsive, restless, justifying, hopeful, scared to miss out, eager to prove something. And that version of me was costing me more money than any strategy failure ever did. So I did something most traders never have the guts to do. I trained myself to respect my rules, even when nobody was watching. Not for discipline, not for motivation, not for pride, for survival. Because once you realize you are your own supervisor, your own risk manager, your own judge and jury, your whole trading identity shifts. I started treating every trade as if someone would review it later. Every entry, every exit, every stop loss, every hesitation, every emotion. And you know what happened? The reckless version of me began to shrink, slowly, quietly, powerfully, because the market wasn't testing my skill, it was testing my character. It wanted to know, would I follow my plan when nobody clapped for me? Would I protect my capital when nobody congratulated me? Would I walk away when nobody praised the discipline? That's when trading became clearer, smoother, cleaner, not easier, but simpler. Because the man I was when the market watched me back finally became the man who deserved to win. You ever wake up one day and realize you're not the same person who started this journey? Not because something big happened, but because something inside you finally quieted down. That happened to me after decades of losing, learning, bleeding, observing, evolving. And one morning, I sat down at my desk, opened my charts, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Nothing. No fear, no rush, no hunger, no fantasy, just calm. And that calm scared me at first, because it felt foreign, like I wasn't even the one trading anymore. But then I understood. Calm is not the absence of emotion. Calm is the presence of control. And that was the moment I knew I had crossed the line from losing trader to consistent killer. Because the real transformation never explodes, it settles. Before I close this story, I want to ask you the last questions that pushed me into that final breakthrough. Questions you must answer honestly if you want to stand where I stand now. Why do you still trade like your old self when you know that version of you never survived the market? Why do you want the results of a consistent trader while keeping the habits of an emotional one? Why do you expect the market to reward you when you're not yet the person who deserves those rewards? Why do you chase outcomes instead of building the identity that leads to outcomes naturally? Why do you fear losing money more than you fear losing your discipline? These questions aren't about charts. They aren't about strategies. They're about identity. Your identity and trading, at its core, is simply a reflection of who you choose to become. There's one final truth I learned late, very late, a truth I wish someone told me when I first started, back when I believed this game was about finding the perfect setup. Here it is. Trading is not a skill you perform. It's a person you become. When I changed who I was, when I became patient, observant, quiet, selective, controlled, the market opened the door I had been slamming my head against for years. The solution wasn't a new indicator. It wasn't a mentor. It wasn't motivation. It wasn't chart patterns. It wasn't some magical system. The solution was me, the new me, the one I built slowly, through every painful lesson I shared with you in these pages. Because the consistency you want, the calm, the clarity, the confidence, the stable profits, they don't come from learning more. They come from unlearning the broken version of yourself that walked into this game thinking it was a lottery. I became a consistent killer the moment I became the kind of man who could hold steady when the market shook. The moment I realized the market wasn't against me, it was shaping me, pressuring me, forging me, just like fire turns metal into a blade. And if you've been paying attention, really paying attention, then you already have the solution, because I've given it to you piece by piece through every chapter. Fix the psychology, fix the identity, fix the behavior, and the trading fixes itself. That's how I went from a losing trader to a consistent one, not by chance, not by luck, but by facing the truths most traders run from their entire lives. So here's the final message: simple, direct, and deadly true. You don't need to become smarter. You need to become stronger. The strategy will follow. The consistency will follow. The profits will follow. Because once you change, everything else has no choice but to change with you.